This week, we're looking at homelessness in the United States and homeless trends and services in the library. So, first, I want to think about the state of homelessness in America. Then, I want to look at homeless trends specifically in the library. Then, we're going to look at services for the homeless in the library and homelessness through library engagement. And finally, I want to look at some critical discussions and programming for homelessness within the library and LIS culture in general. As of January 2015, there were 564,708 people homeless and either sleeping outside on the streets, in emergency shelters, or in transitional housing programs. Chronic homelessness is an individual who has experienced homelessness for a year or longer, or an individual who has experienced homelessness for at least 4 episodes in the last 3 years and has a disability. There's also a large trend of homelessness among families. In 2015, 206,286 people in families experienced homelessness, making up 36% of the homeless population in the United States. However, homelessness among families is typically not a long-term experience. There's also a large veteran population among the homeless. The veteran homeless population is made up of veterans who served in several different conflicts, from World War II to present. And the most common veteran homeless population recently are veterans returning recently from Afghanistan and Iraq, who are increasingly homeless due to traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Within the library, there's a larger conversation around homeless trends and homeless services, specifically at ALA. So, according to ALA's Extending Our Reach, Reducing Homelessness Through Library Engagement, in the library, there are often issues for homeless patrons' equity of access. Some of these issues include library services for people experiencing homelessness that may be limited or denied in many circumstances. So, the homeless in the library are often discriminated against based on library policy that requires a permanent address. There's also fines and fees and other penalties that may work against homeless services. Oftentimes, staff are not trained in services to people in poverty or who are homeless and who are made uncomfortable by prejudices against those who are homeless. And another trend that ALA was seeing within the libraries is that there was limited promotion of the community centers and local organizations that serve people who are homeless. So libraries did not have the right resources to promote these local services. There was also limited access to the library building for the homeless by either lack of transportation or lowered service hours. And there is often the problem of a lack of programs or resources that address people's experiences or current situations. However, there's a lot being done for reducing homelessness through library engagement. Libraries, according to ALA and further resources on reducing homelessness through library engagement, libraries are most successful in providing services aligned with the general mission and purpose of the libraries. So there's many ways that libraries can actually help the homeless and according to their needs. First, there's programming. People who are homeless often want the same programming as other library users, such as computer classes, educational workshops, story times, arts and crafts, and social activities. There's a need for outreach and promotion for homeless patrons. Physical barriers and social exclusions prevent many people who are homeless from getting to the library and learning about programs in a timely fashion. However, making sure that shelters and organizations receive library information about this programming is key to providing successful programming for homeless patrons. Programs of particular interest to the needs of people who are homeless include health, mortgage or rental assistance, and applying for government benefits. There's also the need for reference. Reference is essential to services to homeless patrons. Information of most need to people who are homeless or in jeopardy of becoming homeless may include where to find shelter, food or shower, accessible medical care, help in finding employment, or how to find a professional that can help stop an eviction or foreclosure. One of the keys to successful reference for homeless patrons is having a list of local social services available at the reference desk. It's also important to focus on the needs of young people who are in transitional housing or homeless. Libraries are a special place for children and young people, and they're one of the most important places for young people who are in shelters or in foster care. Library cards are the most essential for building a connection with young people. So it's especially important that these cards are available to young people in flexible situations so that they might necessarily need a state ID or an address or a parent with them in order to get a library card. It's also important for the librarian to be aware that some young people have not had much experience with libraries or that their experiences have been negative ones. So frame the library as a source of free information and entertainment and a place to meet and hang out with friends, and as a general safe space. Finally, there's the partnerships, a potential in partnerships for benefiting homeless patrons. Libraries can locate partners such as transitional housing facilities, food banks and community organizations, health clinics and hospitals, faith-based organizations, and educational institutes and after-school programs. Currently, libraries are actively engaging programming for homelessness and looking at homelessness from a structural level. One example of this that we're looking at this week in class is the CritLib discussion on library services for homeless patrons. Some of the trends that came up in this discussion this week are that libraries are now hiring social workers specifically to work with the homeless patrons and their needs. However, many librarians in this discussion commented that their libraries do not offer any homeless services. Some librarians noted that they do partner with local social services agencies. Another trend of structural discrimination that librarians found in this conversation was that oftentimes their policy may either support or work against homelessness. So, some of the policy that might prohibit behaviors and needs associated with homelessness are that they are required to have a state ID um, or some sort of official ID to get a library card or a campus ID for academic libraries. They also might be required to have an address for a library card. There's also specific policy that asks for no washing in the bathroom, no sleeping in the library, and no large luggage. One of the librarians brought up a great question, which is how do these rules get applied, and do they imply racial bias? So there's this idea of structural discrimination, and these policies might be acted upon with a sort of bias, different types of bias. And librarians also noted that they had no staff training when it came to homeless patrons and homeless resources. Um, Another critical discussion or resource is an archived webinar from Info People, and the link is on the class website. This webinar is called What Do I Do Now? Handling Challenging Situations with Mentally Ill and Homeless Library Users. And this is a two-part series that's free online. And finally, we see more and more a trend of these social workers in the library. There's also a link to an article on that trend. So, overall, there's a lot of conversation happening within the library and the LIS in general on needs for homeless, but there's also still different levels of structural discriminations, and sometimes the conversation isn't necessarily happening at all among library training.